Hello there and welcome to my guide for painting Electro and the Shocker for Marvel Crisis Protocol. As you can see, the first thing I've done is I've sprayed them with some matte white spray from Colourforge. And I'm going to kick things off with Electro, and I'm going to use some moot green to paint any green areas on his suit. This will then receive a wash with some Bell Tan green. While that dries, I'll move on to Shocker, and for his red, I'm going to use some Corn Red, which I'll wash with some Caro Bird Crimson. Then I'm going to go back to Electro and I'm going to relayer the Moot Green. And this will be followed by a highlight of a 50-50 mix of Moot Green and Matte White. For the Shocker, I'm going to relayer the Corn Red, followed by a 50-50 mix of Corn Red and Wazdacker Red. And then finally Wazdacker Red just by itself. For any black details, I'll start with some Abaddon Black. And for the Shocker's Silver Gauntlets, I'm going to use some Iron Hand Steel. I'll then give the black and the steel a wash with some Nuln Oil. Once that wash is dried, I'll highlight the black with some Corvus Black. And I'll follow that up with some Eshin Grey. For the silver, I'll use a 50-50 mix of Iron Hand Steel and Stormhost Silver. Now we're going to work on the yellow. So for that, I'm going to use some Avalanche Sunset. And we'll give it all a wash with some Cassandora Yellow. However, avoid Electro's Lightning. Once the wash is dry, we're going to relayer the Avalanche Sunset, avoiding any of the recesses. That'll be followed by a 50-50 mix of Avalanche Sunset and Flash Gitz Yellow, and this is as far as I'm going to go with the Shocker, as I don't want his yellow to be as bright as Electro's. And then for a final highlight on Electro's suit's yellow, I'm going to use some Flash Gitz Yellow just by itself. Moving on to the Lightning, I'm going to use a 50-50 mix of Avalanche Sunset and Dawn Yellow, and I'm going to kind of do a quasi dry brush. It's more of an overbrush, so there's a little bit more paint on there than there would be for a normal dry brush, but it's still using the same technique. After that, I'll then use Dawn Yellow just by itself to do an actual dry brush. And then finally, a 50-50 mix of Dawn Yellow and Matte White on the sort of corners and the jagged, sharp edges. I'm then going to paint Electro's face with some Bugman's Glow, which I'll wash with some Reichland Flesh Shade. While that dries, I'm going to use some Arithmetic Blue to paint the shock effects for the Shocker. Next, I'm going to use a tiny bit of Abaddon Black to paint in Electro's eyes. Then this will be followed by a 50-50 mix of Bugman's Glow and Cadian Flesh Tone for the first highlight on the flesh, followed by Cadian Flesh Tone just by itself, and then a 50-50 mix of Cadian Flesh Tone and Kislev Flesh. I'm then going to paint the Shocker's eyes with a tiny little bit of matte white. Then I'm going to paint any metal areas with some Iron Hand Steel. And this will be followed by a 50-50 mix of Arithmetic Blue and Matte White to dry brush the effects. Then I'll paint the concrete with some Dawnstone, which I'll edge highlight with some Grey Seer. And then I'm going to paint the rims of the bases with Abaddon Black. And then finally wash the base with some watered down Agrax Earthshade. And once that wash is dried, that's these guys finished. And I have to say, they're an absolute blast to paint. I really did enjoy painting Electro more than I did Shocker, though I think it's because I like Electro better than Shocker as a character. They're super quick to paint too, only coming in about 4 hours or 4.5 hours for the pair. These two are two models from a 5 model set, and I'll be covering the other models in a different video. So if you want to see that, give the channel a subscribe and a like and everything. And I'll see you on the next one. Thank you so much for watching, and goodbye for now.